Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Jason Sanderson, an Assistant Director in the Office of Global Education. And this afternoon, we're going to go over some of the basics about study abroad. So when we talk about study abroad at Georgetown, at OGE, the Office of Global Education, what we do is that we work with all of the undergraduate schools for study abroad. When we're looking at the numbers of programs, we have nearly 200 programs that are approved in over 50 countries. What we do individually in the scope of individual advising is going to be working really with individual students throughout their study abroad experience, whether it's just an initial contact about trying to figure out which is the best program, when you're working on your application, going through orientations before departure, while you're abroad, and then once you come back, if you have any questions on how to get involved and continue that learning process. We also do work with the dean's offices, as well as academic departments, as well as other offices like financial aid and the registrar. So we really do work with every different component of campus to make sure that these experiences are well tied into the Georgetown culture and to just everyone's 4 years here on campus, so that it's not seen as something that's separate. We also do provide a lot of guidance when it comes to students' questions and concerns regarding health and safety and responses in the event of emergency, and that can be no more important than nowadays. So when we're looking at study abroad at Georgetown, you can see some of the statistics here on the screen. They're something that we're quite proud of. So every year we have over 1,000 students who go abroad, and that's going to be from any short-term period all the way up to the full academic year, and sometimes students will even combine those as well. So some students will do perhaps a summer with a semester, a summer with a year, 2 summers, bookending a full year. So there are all sorts of different options depending on what your goals are for going abroad and what kind of time commitment you're able to make to the experience. If we look at the percentage of undergraduates who go abroad during their time at Georgetown, roughly 57% will go abroad while on campus. So it's another very important figure if you consider that the national average is closer to about 8 to 10%. So that's something that Georgetown is very, very proud of, and something that we'd like to see grow even further, but that also speaks to the international culture here present on campus. So students will often ask, and sometimes parents as well, why should I study abroad? What are the benefits? What am I going to get out of this? And those are all very good questions. One of the first things we want to make sure that is going to happen on this experience is that students are able to actually satisfy degree requirements while they are abroad. Of course, it's called study abroad, so that study is one of the first things. We want to make sure that students are able to study and then use that information and credit to then satisfy what they need to do to work towards fulfilling their degree. When students are going abroad, you're going to be able to really look at global issues from a different perspective. So you're going to be coming into these experiences having probably studied them a bit in classrooms here on campus or back in perhaps even high school, but this is going to give you the opportunity to see a completely different perspective about something that you perhaps may already be well versed in, but not necessarily understand what the local perspective is. It, of course, also is a really good way of enhancing your resume because potential employers are always looking for students who have studied abroad, because it makes students more self-reliant, more independent, and also better at problem solving. These are all things that students are really good at doing once they've been abroad, and this is definitely something that can be parlayed into really making sure that you are the most competitive as possible when you get onto the job market. Of course, when you're living in another culture, you're going to be connecting with people from all over, both locals and other internationals. And so that you're going to be able to develop a lot of skills when it comes to working across those cultures to make sure that you're understood, that you're understanding, and that may or may not include a new language. If it does, if it's something that you have already worked on before, it'll help polish some of your skills. But if it's a new language, of course, that's going to be a whole new experience and open your eyes to a different way of looking at things, because language really does shape how you perceive your surroundings. And as I said before, also working on your self-reliance and gaining confidence. That's another very important thing that a lot of students don't necessarily realize initially when they're looking at study abroad and what they may get out of the experience. But once you have to navigate some of these systems, get around a city that you're not accustomed to, perhaps navigate in a language you're not completely proficient in, that's really going to help you with your self-esteem and your confidence levels for working in another setting that may be unknown or unfamiliar to you. When we talk about different types of programs, you're going to hear us use all sorts of different descriptors. So generally speaking, what a lot of students are going to be doing when you're looking at semester programs, which could be a full year, which would be 2 semesters, would be direct matriculation. Direct matriculation programs are just that. You are directly matriculating alongside local students. And that means you're going to be taking up the life of a local student, perhaps living in a dorm with local neighbors, but definitely taking classes alongside your local counterparts in their own language, if that is something that you're able to do given your language proficiency. Area studies are slightly different. Those are going to be programs that tend to be in places where we don't offer a lot of opportunities on campus, particularly when it comes to the local languages. So it's going to give students the opportunity to work on language acquisition while also taking classes that focus on the region, whether that be the economics, the history, the culture, the politics. So students get a wide range of exposure to that region and what is going on in the region, both historically and currently, so they can better understand that. Language programs are going to be programs that are really focused on working on students' language proficiency and increasing that as quickly as possible. They tend to be a bit on the intensive side, and so that gives students ample opportunity to really make a leap in their language proficiency. So generally speaking, if students really invest themselves in those programs in the space of a semester, they can make a year or plus advance in the language that they are studying. We do also have the Vida de Base, the Living and Learning programs. And so those are going to be programs that are really focused on working in a living and learning community, meaning that your classmates and your instructors are also your neighbors and people you're going to be eating with and interacting with out of class as well as in class. The Vida de Base is located right outside of Florence, Italy, and those programs run throughout the year. The other programs that are also different in length are going to be the short-term faculty-led programs. And those programs typically are going to be summer programs, and they can run anywhere from 2 to 3 weeks up to maybe 10 or 11 weeks, depending on the focus of the program. They do range from year to year and vary, but we tend to have about 20 of them that focus on language acquisition as well as looking at different regional themes that are relevant to the faculty who are leading those programs, their experience and their research. And then finally, one of the newer options would be course embedded study abroad. And those are going to be in individual courses. It's part of the course where students would perhaps travel together as a group over a break or something like that, so they can put into practice in situ what they've learned in class. When you're trying to figure out which is the best type of program for you and which of the programs that fit that type would be then the best for you, there are several different types of things you want to be thinking about. First and foremost, of course, academics. Where are you going to be able to get major and minor credit? And how is that going to be able to complement what you need to do to satisfy your requirements? When you're looking at language, do you speak another language? Do you want to learn a new language? Do you need to pass the SFS proficiency in order to do so? Are there options in English in this setting? Because there are a lot of places where we operate, the classes are not available in English, they're only offered in the local language. So those are all things you want to make sure you're investigating. And that's something that you can do on our website, which is at the bottom of every one of these slides, studyabroad.georgetown.edu. When you're looking at what else you're looking to do while abroad, whether there be an internship, there be an alumni network that's active locally, or opportunities to get out into the community and volunteer and help, there are different ways of then interacting with your peers and the local community. When you're looking at also what type of cultural experience you want to have, you also want to think about what you're going to be doing outside of the classroom. So in the classroom and the language of the classroom, that's going to be a good beginning. But what are you going to be doing outside the classroom? Where will you be living? Will you be living with a local family, or will you be living with local roommates? Will you take classes with local students in one of those direct matriculation environments that I mentioned? Will you be able to join a student club or a team? Are there other local activities that you can join as well? Those are all different types of things that you can bring up at an individual advising appointment. If any of those are particularly important to you, then it's important to let the regional advisor know that that is one of the things you are looking to pursue. And then finally, when it comes to personal preferences, you also want to think about, how big is the program where you are looking to go? There are some programs where we do not have a student who goes every single semester. And then there are others where Georgetown may not send a lot of students, but the program itself may be several hundred. And that's an important thing to consider when it comes to your goals and also your personality type. What is it you're looking for? Are you looking to completely branch out, or are you looking to be part of a different cohort, or perhaps some of your friends from your same major are looking to go together and do an intensive study, perhaps even a research project. So those are all things you want to be considering when you're deciding which is the best program for you. When you're considering the requirements, you do want to make sure that you understand how they apply to your individual case. If you're looking at GPA and other academic requirements, what you would find on our website, which is typically going to be at least a 3.0 for the semester programs, is going to be at the time of application. So you do want to keep that in mind. If there's something that is an extenuating circumstance, of course, bring that up to your advisor. But a lot of our partners are going to be also reviewing that. So we need to make sure that we understand what exactly is your case and how we might be able to help you find the appropriate program for you. Through that advising, that is something that we are thankful to say that typically the numbers of students who do not get into their first choice in a given semester is fewer than would fit on a single hand. So we're very happy about that. Students do want to make sure that they are also considering their standing when it comes to both conduct as well as honor council, because that is taken into consideration, as well as any potential disciplinary issues they may have had since being on campus. So do remember that everything that happens before you're looking to go abroad potentially does travel with you and may have an impact on whether or not you're able to go to the certain sites that you are hoping to travel to. When you go abroad, it's going to depend on really what experience we're talking about. If we're talking about the traditional semester programs, that is going to be more junior year. However, if we're looking at the short-term programs and summer programs, that can start as soon as your summer after your first year. Villa de Bautzen is also one of the programs that would be available for second semester sophomores. If you are looking to go abroad as a senior, for whatever reason that may be, typically there is going to be a waiver or petition process required by your school at Georgetown. So if that's something you are considering, again, for whatever reason that may be, do make sure you're discussing that with your curricular dean so that he or she may explain to you what you would need to do in addition to just applying through OGE to make sure that you have the endorsement of your school. When we're talking about finances, we know that students and their families are often very concerned about whether or not it's going to be affordable. The important thing to know is that when it comes to the semester and full year programs, it's going to be fairly comparable to being on main campus with the variable cost of living. So the tuition charges would be the same. And then the cost of living, that's something that you do want to consider when you're looking at potential places where you would be studying. If you're looking at some place in the developing world, you may find that the cost of living is very, very low, but that may be offset by the travel expense to get there. If, on the other hand, you're looking at a major metropolitan area, like for instance, London, Paris, or Copenhagen or Tokyo, you're going to find that those tend to be even more expensive than Washington. So those are all things you want to take into consideration before making your final decision on how that's going to work. If we're looking at any of these programs, the most important thing is to know is that all of the budgets are available on our website. So every program does have its own page, and on that page you will find estimated budgets for each program. And so that will help you and your family get a sense of what would be expected and what you would need to be able to be able to spend depending on what your budget is going to be. Financial aid is applicable for the semester and full year, and it is completely portable. And if there's any excess aid that is reimbursed to you as a student, that then you could use to pay for some of your expenses on the ground. There are additional sources of aid through scholarships and external sources. Students do want to make sure that they understand what the timeline is for those, because if they're for Georgetown, it's going to be relatively straightforward and easy to find. If they are external, some of those scholarships may actually have a very early deadline, sometimes as much as a year before you would be going abroad. So you do want to make sure that you're looking into those earlier as opposed to later. And finally, there are additional Georgetown scholarships, particularly for the summer programs, but those are going to be by program. So do make sure that you look on the websites individually to see which programs offer those and how you would go about applying for them. Of course, nowadays, more than ever, we are very, very interested in maintaining students' sense of and culture of safety. Students are enrolled in a mandatory education abroad insurance that covers all of the very important things beyond just medical insurance, but also emergency assistance. We do also provide orientation and resources before you go and while you are on the ground. There is also a routine assessment that is conducted of our programs and locations to make sure that they do still meet our standards for sending students. There's, of course, through GUPD, always the availability to contact Georgetown, the OGE staff, as well as others. We do also work with International SOS or ISOS to make sure that we have guidance and advice on what is happening in the world and whether there are any recommendations to take into consideration. We do also look at different sources of information to make sure that we are on top of what is happening in the world, to make sure that it is still advisable to send students to different locations. Of course, now students say, okay, that's the basics. Now what should I be doing next? So as I've said a couple times, we have our website, which is studyabroad.georgetown.edu, and that's going to be a very good landing page of source of information, because you're going to find basic information about all the programs that are currently available. One important note for students who may be sophomores and have heard about other programs, but when they're visiting our website are not able to find them. Please know that some programs have been temporarily suspended due to the current sanitary issues across the world. And there are also some of our partners who have unfortunately decided to close their programs. So feel free to ask the regional advisor about the individual programs that you may not be able to find, but please know that some of them have been taken offline because they're no longer available. Do talk to us, and if you have any questions that are of particularly personal nature or perhaps a bit involved. And it's never too early to start talking to your deans and faculty. The earlier you plan this, the more you will be able to work out some of those stickier things, particularly if you have a very strict sequence in your major or majors. You, of course, can always visit our resources online as well. So if you haven't already, you should follow us on all of the major social media platforms at GU Abroad. And now I think we're going to turn it over to your questions. So the first question that we have is, do we know whether or not spring or summer or fall will be happening? That is a very good question. And at this point in time, we are planning on programs moving forward as planned for the upcoming semester and upcoming year. Should things warrant changing that, we will of course let students know, and we will work with students as much as possible when it comes to finding alternative options if it does come to that. But for this particular time, we are still moving forward with all of the currently approved programs. I know that there's another question that often students have, which is, when should I be making appointments? When should I start talking to people? If you're a first-year student, you're probably still a bit overwhelmed by, starting all of these classes remotely and trying to figure out how the Georgetown system works at this stage. So you can definitely wait a little bit of a time, because generally speaking, you're not going to be applying to any program until the semester before you leave. The most notable differences for that would be Oxford and Sciences Po in Paris. Those are typically, and some of the programs in Japan. Those programs are going to have a slightly earlier deadline, which is outlined on our website as to when it takes place. For Sciences Po and for Oxford, it's typically going to be by December of the sophomore year to go abroad anytime in the junior year. Otherwise, though, if you're looking to go in the fall, you're going to apply in the spring. If you're looking to go in the spring, you're going to apply in the fall, and so forth. Beyond that, one of the other things we often know students will ask is, What about other programs? I know Georgetown has all these programs, but what if I know of a different program? And that's a really good question. At this point in time, Georgetown is not endorsing or considering any petitions for independent programs. And that is because we are working through our current partners to make sure that the situation on the ground is viable and receptive for students to arrive. And we would not be able to do that to the degree to our satisfaction if we were not going through our trusted regular partner network. So at this point in time, it is not possible to petition for an independent program. If you are a first-year student, however, you may see that would change by the time you would be looking to go abroad. Okay, I think, let's see. Oh, I think we might have one more question. How will my grades from abroad appear on my transcript? That is a very good question that has multiple answers. So it really does depend on the type of program you will be participating. If you are going on a program that is a regular semester program, so is not one that is at the Villa, for instance, or at GUQ, those credits would appear and grades would appear as transfer. Everything would appear as it is provided to us by our partner. So if it's in a foreign language or a foreign system, that is how it would appear, but it would not be translated. It would, however, have associated Georgetown credits with each of the classes that you take. The notable exceptions to that, as I was saying, is going to be the Villa de Base and GUQ, because those are classes that are taught by Georgetown faculty. So those do go straight into your normal Georgetown transcript under a normal header and do get calculated into your GPA. Summer programs as well, since the vast majority of those are faculty-led programs, those are also going to go directly onto your transcript and be calculated into your GPA. Okay, well, it looks like we may be out of questions. So what I would say is, if you don't have any other questions for us at this time, oh, we have one more. Is it possible to get a job while studying abroad? Well, there's the answer of in normal times, and then there's the answer of right now. Right now, unfortunately, we do not really know how the current situation will play out in students' abilities to do that. Otherwise, it is going to be very much on a case-by-case as far as the individual country where you will be studying and whether they allow for student visa holders to actually work. The one thing that I know that students often come into this asking because they want to make sure that they can work towards their budgets and perhaps get some extra funding to be able to do other things locally. The important thing to keep in mind is that locally, depending on your individual location, it may not be a normal thing for students to actually do that when you are doing it as a part-time situation. Lots of countries do not actually have as part of their culture where students study and work at the same time. So it may be difficult, even if you have the ability to do it, to find the job. Because they would expect more hours than you would be willing or able to commit. The other important impact that this would potentially have is in your ability to do personal activities, including possibly traveling, because it may involve required working on the weekends. So if you do find yourself interested in looking into that, do make sure that you talk with your regional advisor about whether or not that's feasible anywhere that you're looking to go and how so. Okay, so it does look like we may now be out of questions. If you have any specific questions, you may also reach out to the advisors directly, and you can find everyone's name and what they cover on our website, so under the staff section on our website. And you may also, of course, always make an appointment to speak with us if you have particular things you want to discuss as well. So I just want to wish everyone a wonderful afternoon and look forward to seeing you in OGE sometime soon.